Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving deep into a story, well, not just any story, the story of India's constitution.
A story forged in the fires of, well, you could say, immense change.
It's 1947,
The dawn of independence.
and the birth pangs of a nation are rarely, well, peaceful.
It's captivating, really. You have this incredible energy, this hope for a new beginning.
But also the wounds of partition.
Millions displaced, the land itself divided. It was a crucible, to say the least.
And then you have this added layer of complexity, these, what were they called?
Princely states.
Yes. Ruled by their maharajas, their future suddenly uncertain. Do they join India? Try to remain independent? It makes an already chaotic situation even more, well,
Tumultuous.
exactly. And into this maelstrom steps the Constituent Assembly, the body tasked with creating order from chaos. But here's the thing.
They weren't even directly elected by the people. It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
So how did this assembly, chosen by provincial legislatures from elections years prior, how do they even begin to tackle this monumental task?
Well, first, you have these towering figures, 6 names that loom large.
Give us the rundown.
Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, Rajendra Prasad, all from the Congress Party. And then there's B.R. Ambedkar, K.M. Munshi, and Aladi Krishnaswamy Iyer. A formidable group, to say the least.
But even the greatest minds need, well, support. Who else was instrumental in this process?
The unsung heroes. We can't forget the civil servants, people like B.N. Rao and S.N. Mukherjee. They were the ones who translated these grand visions into, well, the actual legal language of the Constitution.
It's like having brilliant architects, but needing master builders to make sure the structure actually stands right.
A perfect analogy. Now, speaking of architects, Nehru's Objectives Resolution from 1946, that was a foundational moment, wouldn't you say?
Laying out the blueprint for the future.
Think of it as the preamble to the Constitution, if you will. It was Nehru, really, who articulated the soul of what India should be.
An independent republic, you mean?
Yes, but also guaranteeing justice, equality, freedom for all its citizens. And the way he presented it. Well, he drew these fascinating parallels to the American and French revolutions.
Really?
That's unexpected.
He wasn't suggesting they simply copy, mind you. More like acknowledging these historical currents, these global aspirations for freedom and self-determination, but with a distinct emphasis on India forging its own path.
I can imagine that must have been quite a powerful speech.
Oh, it was. There's this one line that really captures the essence.
You have it handy?
Of course. Nehru said, and I quote, "We are not going just to copy, I hope, a certain democratic procedure or an institution of a so-called democratic country. We may improve upon it."
It speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does. It's that spirit of, I don't know, innovation amidst such overwhelming challenges. But I'm guessing it wasn't all smooth sailing from there. I mean, forging a nation, it's bound to be, well,
Contentious.
exactly. Were there any particular flashpoints? Any major points of clash within the assembly?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most heated debates revolved around separate electorates. Now, this is a system where
Where different religious communities have their own, what is it?
their own voting systems, their own representation.
A way of ensuring minority voices are heard.
In theory, yes. And a man named B. Pakar Bahadur, he argued passionately for retaining them. He believed it was vital for safeguarding minority representation.
I can see his point, but wow, this is so soon after partition. The wounds are still raw.
Exactly. And that's precisely why it was so controversial. In fact, Patel, remember him, one of our leading figures, he was vehemently opposed to the idea.
Like that.
He called separate electorates a poison that had infected the very fabric of the nation.
Strong words.
They were. He even linked them directly to the violence of partition. His words, dripping with the raw emotion of the time, were, "Do you want peace in this land? If so, do away with it."
Wow, I can practically hear the echoes of that debate even now. Was there anyone who, well, maybe not supported separate electorates, but had a slightly different take on why they were a bad idea?
Yes, Govind Ballabh Pant, another key figure. He also opposed separate electorates, but his reasoning was fascinating.
Tell me.
He stressed the importance of individual citizens, not just community identities.
Interesting. So it wasn't about denying representation?
No, not at all. His argument was that separate electorates would ultimately undermine a unified national spirit. It was about finding that balance between
Individual rights and a sense of national unity.
Precisely. And it shows that even within the agreement that separate electorates were a bad idea, there are these subtle nuances in their reasoning.
So much complexity. It really highlights the incredible task they faced. But were there any voices that challenged the very definition of minority itself?
Oh, absolutely. N.G. Ranga, the socialist leader, he brought a whole new dimension to the table.
Go on.
He argued that the real minority, the truly disadvantaged, were the masses of India, the economically marginalized,
So not defined by religion, but by...
by their economic status. He argued that legal rights were meaningless if you were too poor to exercise them.
It's a perspective we don't often think about, but it makes perfect sense in the context of a newly independent nation grappling with poverty.
And he wasn't alone. Jaipal Singh, a representative for tribal communities, he echoed this sentiment.
How so?
He spoke about the historical marginalization of tribal communities, their voices often unheard despite their significant numbers. It was a powerful plea for inclusion, for understanding, for a genuine mixing of cultures.
It adds this whole other layer to the debate about equality and representation. It's not just about numbers, it's about power, about whose voices are heard.
And whose are silenced.
Exactly. It's clear that crafting a constitution wasn't just about high-minded ideals. It was about addressing the very real, very complex, lived experiences of diverse groups within India.
It's that constant push and pull, isn't it? Between the vision of a unified nation and the realities of its immense diversity.
We've already uncovered so many layers to this story.
And we've barely scratched the surface.
From grand visions to fiery debates, the human element really shines through. I can't wait to hear more.
Well, buckle up, because next time we'll delve into the power dynamics between the central government and the states, the contentious language question.
Ooh, I'm already intrigued. Until then, thanks for listening.
Welcome back. You know, it's easy to get lost in the details of these debates, but we have to remember these weren't just theoretical exercises.
Right, these were real people grappling with real challenges.
Exactly. And the anxieties, the aspirations of a nation emerging from, well, centuries of colonial rule, it all comes pouring out in these discussions.
And the trauma of partition, that really seems to have cast a long shadow over everything.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when it came to the question of, well, power. How do you balance the need for unity with the desire for regional autonomy?
The age-old dilemma of federalism.
Precisely. And you see this tension playing out in the debates about the balance of power between the central government and the states.
So before partition, the Congress Party was leaning towards granting more autonomy to the provinces, right?
That's right. But then everything changes. Suddenly the need for a strong central authority capable of ensuring stability, preventing, further fragmentation, it becomes paramount.
In a sense, you can't blame them for wanting to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past.
Exactly. Leaders like Nehru, they argued passionately for a powerful center, one capable of coordinating essential matters like defense, economic development. It was about preventing, well, another partition, really.
But surely not everyone agreed.
Oh, there was pushback, definitely. K. Santhanam, for example, a strong advocate for states' rights, he warned against centralizing too much power.
I imagine he saw it as a threat to regional autonomy.
More than that, even. He feared that an overburdened center would become, well, inefficient, unresponsive, and ultimately lead to resentment, even revolt from the states.
He had a point, though, didn't he? That image of states being forced to go cap in hand to the center for basic needs like education, sanitation, that's powerful stuff.
It is. It highlights that fundamental tension, doesn't it? That need to balance national unity with regional aspirations.
It's amazing how these debates from decades ago still resonate, We're still grappling with these questions about federalism, about the distribution of power.
They're timeless, aren't they? And it's not just about federalism either. The whole question of individual rights, especially for, well, historically marginalized groups, that was a central concern throughout the framing of the Constitution.
The debate around separate electorates, that's a prime example.
Absolutely. Patel's denunciation of them as a poison, that really underscores the anxieties surrounding the issue. But it's important to remember not all members of minority communities supported them.
Right. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking of communities as, well, monolithic.
Exactly. Begum Aizaz Rasool, for instance, she argued that separate electorates, while seemingly protective, would actually isolate minorities, make them more vulnerable in the long run.
So true integration, true representation comes from participating in the broader political system.
That was her argument. And then you have figures like N.G. Ranga, who we talked about earlier, who redefined minority altogether, focusing on economic disadvantage.
His point about the masses needing props and a ladder to climb out of poverty, that's something that sticks with you.
It does, doesn't it? It forces us to think more broadly about what true equality means.
And Jaipal Singh, the representative for tribal communities, he brought a similar lens to the discussion.
He did. He argued that tribal communities, while not numerically a minority, had been pushed to the margins. Their voices, their concerns, often ignored.
His call for greater understanding, for a genuine mixing of cultures that feels so relevant even today.
It does, doesn't it? It speaks to that aspiration of building a society where diversity is not just tolerated, but truly embraced.
So far, we focus a lot on the debates, the disagreements, but what about the actual decisions that emerged from these discussions? What did they ultimately agree on?
Well, alongside those passionate debates, the Assembly also made some critical choices about the very structure of the new Indian state. One of the biggest decisions was opting for a parliamentary system of government.
Why did they go that route?
Several factors played a role. Familiarity with the British system was certainly one, but they also believed that a parliamentary system, with its emphasis on representation and accountability, would be more responsive to the needs of, well, such a diverse electorate.
It's also a system that, in theory at least, reduces the chances of gridlock, right?
Exactly. And that was a major concern, especially in the wake of partition. They wanted to ensure that the government could function effectively, could address the pressing challenges facing the nation.
It sounds like they saw the parliamentary system as a way of, I don't know, building a stronger, more unified nation.
That's right, a nation where the government was ultimately answerable to the people. And this commitment to unity, it also played a key role in their decision to adopt a federal system.
Why was that seen as so important?
Well, a federal system where power is shared between the central government and the states, it was seen as crucial for accommodating India's vast diversity. Different regions, different languages, different cultures. A federal system allowed them a degree of self-governance while still remaining part of a larger whole.
It's that balance again, isn't it, between unity and diversity?
It's a theme that runs through the entire Constitution, really. And it's not just about structures and systems either. It's about values, about aspirations.
This is about the kind of nation they wanted to create.
Exactly. And it's through this intricate tapestry of debates, compromises, visionary thinking, that's how the Indian Constitution finally emerged.
A document that tries to reconcile so many competing demands, so many different visions.
The needs of unity and diversity, individual rights and national interests, tradition and modernity, it's all there, woven into the fabric of the Constitution.
It's a monumental achievement, especially given the context in which it was created.
It truly is a testament to human collaboration, to the enduring power of, well, you could say hope.
I'm already feeling a much deeper appreciation for this document, for the stories behind it.
And we've only just begun to explore its depths.
Well, I can't wait to dive even deeper. What other insights await us? Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive. We've talked about the context, the debates, the big decisions, but I think what everyone really wants to know is, what does this Constitution actually say? What rights does it guarantee?
It's the heart of the matter, isn't it? How do you translate these grand ideals of human dignity and freedom into, well, actual legal language? It's fascinating. India's framers, they drew inspiration from all over.
Oh, tell me more.
The American Bill of Rights, France's Declaration of the Rights of Man. They even looked at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Oh, a global outlook. But I imagine they weren't just copying and pasting.
No, not at all. They were adapting these principles to fit the the incredibly complex reality of India.
So give us the highlights. What are some of these fundamental rights that they enshrined in the Constitution?
Well, let's start with the cornerstone, Article 14, the right to equality. Now, this was revolutionary, especially in a society as deeply divided as India was back then.
Divided.
Oh, everything. Religion, caste, gender, where you were born. The Constitution declared that none of these could be grounds for discrimination. Imagine the impact.
It must have been incredibly powerful, especially for those who had, well, historically, faced so much prejudice.
It was a bold statement.
Yeah.
And then you have Articles 19 to 22, which lay out a whole range of freedoms.
Right.
Freedom of speech and expression, the right to assemble, to form associations, freedom of movement, even the right to choose your residence, your profession. It's all there.
It's almost like they were trying to anticipate every possible way someone's freedom could be restricted and say, nope, not on our watch.
It's about individual autonomy, about recognizing that people have the right to live their lives as they see fit. Of course, within the bounds of, well, reasonable restriction.
Right, you can't just have absolute freedom. That would be chaos.
Exactly. And given India's incredible religious diversity, the question of religious freedom that was paramount.
So what did they decide?
They guaranteed the right to practice, propagate, and even manage religious affairs. All faiths were to be treated equally before the law.
That sounds like a potential recipe for well, I don't know, conflict. Were there any safeguards built in?
You're right to point that out. The right to religious freedom isn't absolute. The Constitution allows for reasonable restrictions, things like public order, morality, health. It's that balance again.
We've seen that theme come up a lot. So, besides these basic freedoms, what other rights did they include?
Well, there's the right to constitutional remedies. It's a mouthful. But basically, it means that if your fundamental rights are violated, you have the power to go to court and seek redress.
So it's not just empty promises. There's an actual mechanism for holding the government accountable.
Exactly. And they also recognize the need to protect those who might not be able to protect themselves. So they prohibited things like forced labor, child labor, human trafficking. It's about safeguarding the most vulnerable.
Makes sense. We often think of rights as belonging to individuals. But did they also recognize the rights of groups, of communities?
They did. Specifically, they included cultural and educational rights for minority communities. It's the idea that a truly inclusive society values and protects the unique identities of all its members, not just individuals in isolation, but communities as well.
It's incredible how they managed to address such a wide range of concerns to create this document that's both comprehensive and well aspirational.
It is, but the real question is, how has it all played out in practice? Have these rights actually made a difference in the lives of ordinary Indians?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, and honestly, it's a question that deserves its own deep dive. But to put it simply, it's been a mixed bag. There have been incredible triumphs, landmark court judgments that have upheld and expanded these rights. But there have also been, well, setbacks. Times when those rights have been violated, ignored.
So it's not a simple success story.
No, not at all. It's an ongoing process, a constant struggle.
What about the role of the judiciary? How have the courts interpreted and enforced these rights?
The courts have played a crucial role, often acting as a check on the power of government. They've ensured that the Constitution remains, well, a living document, something that's relevant to the changing realities of Indian society.
That's so important, this idea that it's not just a static set of rules, but something that can evolve and adapt.
Exactly. And that's what makes the Indian Constitution so fascinating. It's not just a relic of the past, it's a living, breathing document that continues to shape the present and the future.
It's almost like a map guiding India on its journey toward a more, I don't know, a more just and equitable future.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And as we wrap up our deep dive, I hope you're left with a sense of awe at the sheer scale and ambition of this document, and a deeper appreciation for its enduring legacy.
I know I am. It's been an incredible journey. Through history, through law, through, well, the human spirit, really.
We've seen how grand visions meet messy realities, how passionate debates shape a nation's destiny, how the quest for freedom and equality, it's a never-ending process.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway from our exploration. This story, the story of the Indian Constitution, it's not just about the past. It's about the present. It's about the future. It's a story that we're all a part of.
We are, and we all have a role to play in shaping its next chapter. So to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. We hope it sparked your curiosity, inspired you to learn more. And until next time, keep exploring.